Hello and welcome to episode 15 of TextWired by Aman. So today's episode is going to be very interesting. We are going to touch upon the recruitment aspect of textile and fashion industry. And to cover this topic, we have Krisda today, who is a very old friend of mine. He has been working in recruitment for quite some time. So welcome to the episode, Krisda.
Thanks, Aman. Thanks for having me.
Right. So let's get to it. Let's get some background on what got you into recruitment and how long has it been for you?
Yeah, of course, man. I've been working in recruiting for about close to 5 years now.
Oh,
So
nice.
started in Thailand, with Agoda, and then I moved to Singapore like a couple of years later, and I was also a recruiter there, and I was working in Google to hire specifically for like technical roles and stuff.
All right.
And then now I'm not exactly in a role which is in recruiting, but I'm still in the recruiting industry. So
Yeah.
I'm in customer success, which is, customer success for LinkedIn, which
Okay.
is also, selling like recruiting products and stuff. So what I do is more of like strategic advisory to companies and, maybe teach them how to use the recruiting tools and stuff. But yeah, it's more of a
Okay.
strategic element, but it's still very much in the recruiting industry. So it's been about
Yeah.
5 years
Yeah, you're
overall.
pretty equipped to know the ins and outs of the whole recruitment industry, I would say. And
I
given
hope,
all those uh, fancy company names, I'm sure we have the right person today on the episode.
I hope so. Or this is going to be a very disappointing podcast.
Oh, come on, don't be modest. So, has your experience been in the recruitment industry so far?
It's good. So far, I think I've seen a contrast of like a lot of different things. Firstly, working in startups and then
Yeah,
working for very well established companies. So
right,
you get to see very different ways of how things work, including from processes, tools that you have available to yourself. And
right,
then, at the same time now shifting to a role that is different in a way,
right,
but
right.
get to see a more broad overview of the whole recruiting industries. So you get a chance to speak to people who are working in startups. You get a chance to speak to people who are working in well-established places. So,
Right.
and at the same time, I think one thing that's pretty interesting for me is also you get to hire for a lot of different roles. And
Oh,
as a
nice. Yeah.
recruiter, what
Yeah.
what that forces you to do is you have to educate yourself in those industries, right? So for me,
Oh,
even
yeah.
though primarily it's been tech, but then what am I hiring for under tech? Is it
Mm,
engineering? Is it product management? Is it design? Is it like, sometimes it's also business roles. So
right.
have to be well equipped and up to date on
Yeah.
what's happening in these markets and these industries to also be able to
Yeah.
talk.
Yeah. Like
So
you
it's been
are
very
required.
interesting.
Yeah, you are required to study the model before you can actually go through the resumes because you have to find the perfect fit. Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah, exactly. So there's this sort of pressure to be able to make sure that what you're reading in the resume, you even know what you're reading. That's the main thing.
Exactly.
Yeah,
Exactly.
you need to
Yeah.
be able to know that is this resume good or not.
Mm.
But yeah, I think we'll talk about that a little bit more. But it's been very interesting.
Right, right. So some I want some insight. So if I was to ask you one thing that's different between working for a small company and working for a multinational company in the recruitment industry, what's that one thing? Of course, there's going to be many things, but if you were to mention one thing that that's different from working in a startup and a multinational company in a recruitment industry, being a recruiter,
Yeah.
what's that
So
one thing?
I think it's data. One thing that's very important these days is, I think everybody talks about having like a data centric
Fair,
approach, right?
right? Fair,
You wanna
yeah.
you wanna be able to have access to data and be able to see where the issues are, but not everybody has that access to data and are able to find those problems
Mm,
as fast as maybe a bigger company would because you have a lot of these tools available to you. So
right.
I think that's very different. I think my mindset has shifted in that sense as well, where I've become more data centric but
All
I'm
right.
also privileged to be data centric, if that makes sense.
Right. So to break it down in like simple terms, data is like the information being collected over time based on the industry you are. So of course, a lot of startups in that industry, they are not long enough in the market to have enough information about the industry to actually have a strategic plan or
Yeah.
to have like a unique product to provide in this industry. So
Yeah. It's
yeah.
it's more the unique product element that you mentioned, right? Sometimes you just don't have the money to get that product to be
Right.
able to afford a product that tells you all the data stories that you need to know for your company. But
Right.
then, when you're in a more well-established organization, obviously you have that at your hands a little bit more.
Yeah,
So
I think there's a lot more to than like to recruitment because uh, to simplify what recruitment is basically there is a job opening and whoever is eligible to apply or have a resume can basically just apply for it and you get a job. But there's a lot more that goes on in the background that makes it so simplified to our eyes that we see today. I like that you mentioned about the startup because before I got into the textile business myself, I also was interning at a recruitment firm. It was a startup recruitment firm, and I can say I had the same idea of data that like that you mentioned. That data drives how the company is going to work, or is going to function or provide in the market. So, uh, how much has recruitment changed over the time? For change, okay, I'll break down change. I mean, in terms of online and offline recruitment. So, online is okay, we all know that there are job sites, but how have there's a lot more to online. So, how has the whole field of online changed in the
yeah,
recruitment industry?
yeah, I think I'll also talk a little bit about like how just like the function of being a recruiter has changed. Like, but
Okay,
we
yeah,
a little bit later. But in terms of recruiting online, right? There's all this emergence of platform. Obviously, I'm not just plugging my own company, but obviously LinkedIn is one.
right, yeah,
But
yeah,
then
yeah,
you're seeing all this and you're seeing an emergence of job portals and these new websites that are coming into play these days. But
right,
what it's helping you to do is that information these days and even persons like your profile is very accessible to almost everybody now. You're
right,
available on so many different social media platforms, right? And you're also available on so many job portals. So
right,
because that has also saved a lot of time for, let's say, a recruiter or a HR professional, a talent acquisition professional to be able to find you.
right.
That's actually helped them to make things a lot faster.
Mm,
So recruiting online has changed tremendously in the last 10 years because of the emergence of all these platforms. So that's been
right.
something quite interesting and something that I feel like recruiters over the past 10 years, I've not been in the industry for that long, but somebody who's been in the industry for 10 years would probably say that that's a significant change in the market and the way that they are hiring these days.
Right. I, yeah, I can imagine things going online is making so much more convenient because imagine so many people just graduating and trying to look for a job, and imagine there was no online platform to apply for any of the job openings. Like it would be so hard to like fulfill all these job openings and physically going hard, make like setting up a booth, collecting resumes, contact
Yeah,
numbers, and contacting people.
yeah,
Oh, it must be like a headache. So that brings me to the next point, like recruiting offline. So I know in the textile and fashion industry, because you are always looking for somebody who is more reliable,
yeah,
and you want to make sure that somebody that you are hiring is eligible enough to actually do the job. So uh, from my personal experience, when I need to hire some like a fashion designer, I actually wanted to I would be more than happy if I got a recommendation from somebody that okay, there's so and so person who is a fashion designer as has been working for some time. I would be more than happy to give them a chance rather than go for like an online
yeah,
uh,
yeah.
yeah, like
Like an
have
online
a
post,
opening online.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah,
So how how big is the offline industry compared to the online, and if it's still there today?
So I think that's a very interesting example that you gave, right? I was going to ask you something along those lines as well, but
Oh,
recruiting
okay.
offline
Yeah.
is never going away. Recruiting offline is just simply not going away because, you know, that includes like getting a good reference from somebody, that also
Mm,
is considered like recruiting offline. But I think what you're finding today is that there needs to be a balance of online and offline recruiting.
right.
You need to find a balance of what works for your organization, right? Because again, when we speak about recruiting online, you also need to be able to pay for those online products. So it's not necessarily going to work for every company. So
Fair.
that's where recruiting offline comes into play, right? You could, it could be like word of mouth. It could be somebody that someone knows, which usually is like what we call a referral or reference. That is
Right.
something that is probably never going to go away. But then, if you're a company, if you're like in textile, if you're in whatever industry, you need to find a strategy that works for yourself. So that could be finding a good balance between these two products,
Fair.
right?
Fair. Fair.
Yeah.
And also, I think for higher managerial roles, I think offline would be more preferred because you need a more reliable source and a reliable person who you want to make sure has good enough experience, and there is you want like a recommendation from somebody who has experience with that person, that okay, this person is good enough to be in a managerial position, and
Yeah.
then you don't feel like the need to go online and find more people. Oh
Yeah.
man.
Like part of the process these days, there's always an element of like the offline side, right? Because you want to know if this person is really good as they've just told you in the interviews,
Yeah, the profile
right?
needs to match. Yes.
Yeah. So there's always going to be a process of, finding your references, finding your referral, asking if you are really what you are. So,
Mhm. Right.
there's going to be
Yeah.
elements of that in the process, right? Because yeah, like
There's too much
what
bias in it. Yeah.
yeah, what's really telling if you are really who you just spoke
Yeah. It's
introduced to be,
yeah.
right?
I get where you're getting at. Like it's easier to make a resume, but resume doesn't match your capabilities. It's just words on
Yeah,
a paper. So
yeah.
you do need some references to your work, especially if it's like offline.
Yeah, but
But
then
yeah.
on the topic of offline, if you ask someone who graduated from our university, since we went to the same university,
Right. Yeah.
how they applied for a job 10 years ago, maybe even longer, versus how someone who's graduating our university this year is applying for a role,
Right. Right.
experience is going to be significantly different because, just speaking to somebody who graduated like 10 years ago, I remember my seniors talking about how they had to go to bunch of different career fairs that were around the city.
Right.
You,
Right. Right.
you remember there used to be a bunch of those in Thailand, and we're seeing lesser and lesser these days.
Yeah, yeah.
Uh,
Recruiters used to come to colleges and just pick. Yeah.
yeah, they still do, but I think the number of that happening has reduced significantly. So
Mm.
you're obviously going to still see them come up, but the purpose could be changed, right? The offline recruiting purpose could be more of a branding purpose versus just actually being there to collect
Right,
resumes.
it's like online and
Yeah,
offline shopping, basically.
exactly,
Like
exactly.
online, you can get access to everything, but then there is something about offline that's just more convincing.
Exactly. So getting a chance to speak to somebody who, was applying 10 years ago, their experiences is completely different to what maybe like you and I are going to go through
Right.
or went through already. So that's
Yeah.
something that's been, quite interesting to see as well.
Yeah, we had to find ways to get job. Oh,
that,
bring back
that's
memories.
the underlying thing, right? I just need a job.
You just need a job, but you don't know how sometimes.
Yeah.
Oh man. Oh, good old days. Okay, since this is more of a textile and fashion podcast, I want to get into the more uh, I want to get into this field. So, and majorly in textile and fashion industry, it's most of it is about creativity. So somebody who is an art who is artistic, or is very fond of being creative, because in the textile and fashion industry there are so many creative jobs, because it basically runs on creativity. Because for example, if you need a new shirt or a new trousers, there are so many prints. You have to create so many prints, so many designs. Like, okay, like fashion shows is all about designing and creativity. There's creativity in this, setting up a stage, creativity in the PR,
Mm.
creativity in how you do the whole show, setting up a stage, setting up designs. Oh, there's so many things, and not just fashion. There is also textiles, which is the fabric part. So also you need to, there is creativity in actually the technical aspect also, because in how you design a fabric, you also have to be creative about creating new patterns or textures,
Yeah.
or even creating new prints that does not that can be made in, how do you say, primary stages of producing fabric. So
Yeah.
there's a lot of creativity in that. This is a huge range for in this industry for creative jobs. So somebody who is aspiring to get in this job, what do you think is the new way to be found in today's time?
Yeah, that's a very interesting question. And I think I'd also take it a step even further, right? I think not just like textile and fashion, but then, anything that you categorize in the creative industry, it's a very, very tricky.
Broad, yeah.
It, yeah, it's very tricky compared to somebody who has like a business profile and stuff.
Right.
So,
Yeah.
firstly, like you mentioned, I'm, just to give a heads up also to everyone who's listening, I'm not familiar with textile industry as much as Aman would be, but
Right. Right.
uh, it's just this is on a broad concept of recruiting. Firstly, I think it's very important to understand what your industry is looking for. I think that's very important. And,
Right.
a person applying for a business role is not going to be, it's not going to have the same experience as you, someone who's like applying for a creative role. The traditional concept of a resume, a CV might
Right.
not even be applicable in that industry, right?
Right.
So
Is it because there's nothing fixed? Like there's not a description, because it all
I
depends on you.
also think it doesn't demonstrate who you are as a person,
Fair.
who
Yeah.
who you could be for that particular company, right? Like
Right.
just to
Fair.
give you an experience, like when I had a shift of hiring very pure business roles to when they asked me to hire for designers and stuff. And
Okay.
this is still in the tech space. So it's still not completely relatable, but then it's a shift, right? Because you're going from hiring from the business field to hiring for a more creative field.
Creative field. Yeah.
And, yeah. And then when you're hiring for creative field, you realize that the things that they're sending you is not the same as what a business person was sending you. And I'm not talking about anything weird, but
All right.
they start sending you more portfolios. They start sending you more work that they've done in the past before, whether it's in their own independent time or it's with a company that they used to work for before.
Right.
So
Right.
I had to understand firstly like why they were sending me those things. And I think I
Oh.
mentioned it in the start, right? There's a huge learning curve every time there's a shift in focus happens for yourself in that, as a
Yeah. Yeah.
result. So it took me some time to understand, as a designer, as a, in this creative field, this is actually what is important for that particular person.
Yeah.
So, it's very important for yourself to make sure that you're up to date on what your industry is looking for. And,
Fair.
even just in general, the creative field, right? You need to make
Hmm.
sure that you are able to show your work, not just write a resume like how a traditional business person would, but make sure that we know the kind of work that you've done before, because it's a lot about visual.
Exactly.
If that makes
Yeah.
sense. So
Yeah.
you,
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
yeah, you want to make sure that you have something like a visual presence, a personal brand that's available online or wherever for that
Right.
particular person to take a look and realize that, okay, this person is a good designer, is a good textile engineer, whatever field that may apply to. But you do have to understand that it's very different from what the other person might be going through.
Right. Right. Yeah, okay. This kind of matches with uh, what I said, what I mentioned earlier, where there was a time I was looking for a fashion designer, and I few candidates that I found, they they did have a portfolio, like you mentioned that it's very important to show their work. It A lot of them did. They were not very updated with their portfolio. Like some of them, they had few
Yeah.
things that were drawn on the paper, which is not a good way to present because everything is digital nowadays. So
Yeah.
you are supposed to have things online and have a variety of, I want to say, experience, at least exposure when it comes to designing or anything creative. It's not just one type of creative. Okay, specialization is another thing, but when it just comes to designing, there has to be a different ways of being creative in the same field.
Yeah.
Like, okay, if I had to cut down in designing, so a shirt, a shirt is a shirt, but then for a woman's shirt, they have so many different types of sleeves.
Yeah.
uh, there's so many types of cuts, there's so many types of outlooks, fittings. So if I found a fashion designer who has only focused on sleeves, then I would want to know what else can they do in the space of just shirts when it comes to designing a woman's shirt. So it's very important to be very updated about the new trends and what are they experimenting with in their portfolio. And so I agree with you, Krisda, about being updated in that industry or
Yeah.
what the companies are looking for nowadays.
And I think to add to that, like we mentioned about how all this information is so accessible by a lot of people,
Right,
and I think obviously I want to keep like the more emerging places where they don't have access to these things, but predominantly like what you and I deal with is people who do have access to um, being able to put their work up in the digital space,
right,
right? And some people might not have updated it for a very long time, or they don't realize the importance of having that. And also, when you're taking a look at your own portfolio, I think you also need to be able to explain what kind of story that is telling. Like you mentioned, you want to see a lot of diversity in experience
right,
and
right. Yeah,
stuff.
diversity. Yeah,
So you want to make sure that that thing, the people who are putting up those portfolio also realize that that is actually something that's quite important, that there's actually someone who's actually going to be looking at this someday. So
right,
they don't know why they're updating it today, but they don't realize that the benefits of doing it constantly and where that can get you. So I think that's something that maybe in the creative field is quite important. And
right, right.
again, this is just based on my experience that I've dealt with so far.
Yeah, no, it's fair. Like, I think your experience is really shining here because you're making some really valid points. So,
Like
yeah.
I think we probably spoke about this before, but how even someone's sisters or like my sister, if anyone's getting married, how do they know that their wedding's designer is actually a good wedding designer? And I'm talking about like the traditional sari and stuff, right?
Yes, yes, yes.
That the designer they're choosing is a good designer. That designer is not going to send you a Word document of their CV, right? Hey, I've designed
Right,
500.
right, right.
Oh,
Yeah, fair.
you want to be able to see a portfolio of their work. You want to be able to see what kind of sari have they designed before, or any type of clothing. I don't know why I picked that example, but it just came to my mind.
Uh,
Um,
it makes sense. Definitely makes sense
yeah,
because yeah,
yeah, that's an example of when I would say in the creative field, would that also is something that I consider as a creative field. I think that's when you can see the difference between when someone's picking and choosing you to work for them or with them, right? That's the
right.
importance of having your work up to date that people can refer to.
Right, right, right. So, in terms of being updated, so do you think what's the best way to get in the market for somebody who's being very creative? Do you think so? What I've come across is there are agencies, recruitment agencies, and there are job sites. So, for a creative person, which one is more efficient, or would you say the difference between going through an agent or applying through job sites? Because I think even LinkedIn has LinkedIn Jobs, which is also like an online platform to just apply. So, what do you think is the difference between going through agencies, recruitment agencies, and job sites?
Yeah, I think this is also another thing when we were talking about how you need to understand what's important for your field, but you also need to understand where things are, where you can reach more people, right? There's definitely a lot of creative roles posted on these job portals,
Right.
LinkedIn, our local place could be like JobCB and stuff. I do
Yeah.
see a lot of creative roles that are posted on there. But then also on the other hand, if you're from a creative industry, and
Right.
some who has a expertise, like yourself would tell me that in textile, networking works better, right? You go to these networking shows, networking events like fashion shows and stuff. And obviously this is just giving a very like wild example that I have no knowledge about. But if you tell me that, you experience that is something that works better for this industry, I
Right.
would actually maybe spend more time on actually going to these shows, right?
Right.
Networking more, meeting designers and stuff that you want to work with, and sharing a portfolio with them, something that they can take a look at and contact you back because they've seen a piece of your work, right?
Yes. Yes.
And
Yes. Yeah.
and then also, of course, if you think that online works better for you, you
Right.
also need to spend time online. But then again, this really comes down to you doing your research, you understanding your industry, and then you putting in time where you feel is most applicable. Because, Aman,
Okay.
if you tell me like in your experience as textile, you've actually found um, better ways to recruit people from fashion shows and stuff, I would not
Exactly.
argue with you. I would just tell you, okay, then spend more time there and spend lesser time on the other field, right? So that's
Exactly.
how we go about it.
Right, because textile and I liked that you brought the point up because textile and fashion is an industry where a lot of things are done offline. So you have a lot more opportunities to network and meet people, and you have a very good opportunity to go directly to a company or to a person or like an agency in in a job fair or a textile fair or a fashion fair or garment fair. You can go to any of these and you can just pick out people, you can talk to them what they want. So instead of if somebody who wants to get into this field is having a hard time doing research online, because I did too, I did not have enough, there's not enough material I could find online when it comes to textile fabrics. And but I got to know a lot more when I attended these textile fairs, because I knew the different type of fabrics and textures and stuff. These things can't be communicated or explained online, so it's very important to be uh, offline, present offline. So by being
Exactly.
present offline, it's like networking and all. So for somebody who wants to be in the merchandiser field or wants to be in like a garment designer kind of thing, then I think you would want to be in more present in job fairs, not job fairs, textile fairs. So yeah, so you can see the companies, what type they're doing and what you're interested in. It's you get more opportunity to choose, whereas online you don't know what the company is doing and who's present. And so yeah,
Yeah,
I think
exactly.
offline.
Like you mentioned, it just could be the fact that your industry is not online yet. So doing your research will actually let you know that, and then you would be spending more times in the fairs that you mentioned, right? So
Okay.
there's not a one size fits all. I think that's the saying, but it could not be. But
Right, right,
you need to make sure that you do your research and you know what is going to work for that particular industry, and then you
right,
spend your time appropriately on the avenues that's going to get you the best result. But
right, right, right.
I think I'm also very curious. Since I have you as a textile entrepreneur here, if you if
Right.
you if you if you're starting your own company, which I'm sure you are, but if you had to hire somebody like a designer, like a anything related to creative field in your company, right?
Right.
Anyone listening to this, like you mentioned, how would they get in touch with you, or like what can they send you, which is an accurate demonstration of what
Okay.
kind of designer they are? How would you
Okay.
go about that?
Interesting that you put it on me, but also fair, because like I said earlier, it's very important to be present offline. Like I said, the industry is offline, right? So a lot of the selling and networking happens in these textile fairs. So I will obviously be present there. So if I find somebody who is trying to uh, looking to be recruited and is finding a job, and they meet me in these online fairs, I think I'd be more than likely to hire them, even though I put a job listing on these online websites, or I have these recruiters who are doing the search for me. I will like more. I will more than have. I'll be more than happy to recruit somebody I met in these textile fairs. If I could hire somebody offline, it's it's a it'd be more like credible. It's the
Yeah,
same like shopping. Even if you shop online, but then the experience you get from shopping from a store, you
yeah,
know what you're buying. You have experience what you're buying. So if I met somebody in a networking fair, I would be more than happy because I have seen the person. I know the personality of the person, the way the candidate talks, the way it presents themselves, or they have showed their profile. I have more opportunity to ask them before I even shortlist. Because what happens online is I straight away have to go through resumes, uh, go through the portfolios and shortlist. Some people might be able to sell the portfolio more better than than what I see online. So I think
yeah.
offline is very important, and online has like has a fair share of it.
And
But
no argument there, because I have no knowledge about, or I don't have a lot of knowledge about your industry. But if you're
yeah,
saying that's what works for you, that's where you should spend your time. And like you mentioned, in the end, right, like other than them just coming and talking to you and giving you their where they worked and stuff, you would also want to see their designs, and you would also want to be able to look at some of the work that they've done. So
yeah,
that's also a way that they could get to you, right? They could share an updated portfolio of the things that they designed, the patterns and stuff that you spoke about.
right, right. Yeah. But even though because I have made the job opening available everywhere, I'll be more than happy. I'll have to go through all the candidates anyways. I'm not saying offline is the best, but it just gives you, it just builds more credibility for yourself
Yeah,
to be hired. And I think the probabilities get higher. Yeah, fair enough. Because textile and fashion industry has a lot of space for creativity, so it's very hard to narrow down to a specific type of job. So that's the reason I'm not trying to pick on a specific designation. So to summarize, what you said would be more to be like updated in what's required in the type of work that the specific candidate is looking for, and always have uh, always have the portfolio Uh, available whenever it's needed, and portfolio weights more than CV or resume for you, and
yeah.
also
But
networking. Yeah.
yeah, like the main thing is just to make sure that you understand what's important in your field and spend
Mm,
time there. So, this advice is probably applicable to somebody coming from business, design,
right,
healthcare, anything you can think of, right?
right, right.
So just make sure that you understand what's important in your industry, and then tailor whatever you're offering according to what's updated there. All this
Okay,
information do
okay.
research on. So
Yeah.
you need to be able to do that.
Yeah. On the note of updating, since you are on LinkedIn, I have a question. So if somebody who is on a creative field and is regularly posting their portfolio or specific anything creative that they do, if they're posting on their profile frequently on LinkedIn and connecting with people, do you think that helps to be recruited?
Absolutely. I think one thing that I wish I knew earlier was the importance of building my personal brand when I was in university.
Okay.
I created a profile online, and I don't want to keep saying LinkedIn because I work there, but
Right, right.
just
No, because
in
I'm
yeah,
picking on LinkedIn because it's like a social media, but like for business, and
yeah,
everybody is on it for business. So that's why
yeah,
I said it's a good space to be listed on. So I just
yeah.
wanted to say if you get the attention.
But this is probably a concept that should have been let know to a lot of people quite some time ago, was the importance of personal brand, right? You
Right,
need to be able to build your personal brand on these platforms to be noticed. It's just as simple as that. Like you mentioned, the more you share, the more you connect with people. This is just basic social media 101. It gets you more exposure,
right,
right? But to also get exposure and to also be noticed, and not just to be noticed, but for somebody to notice you and actually want to connect with you and know more, you need a good personal brand. Your profile needs to be able to tell a story that you want to, right? and obviously sharing more content, sharing your portfolio, sharing if you're a musician, sharing your music, sharing your podcast,
Right.
everything that you want to
Right.
share in creative field. Obviously, people are gonna take notice to it. You just don't know
Right.
when the right person is listening, right?
Yeah.
So make sure that you do have that personal branding online.
Yeah. I asked like I'm glad like what you answered, because I had similar I also had similar opinion, because even back then when I was trying to look for a job, I really underestimated the importance of uh being present online. It's not only being present, being active online, I would say. It's to
Yeah,
update and like connect with people, and I don't know. Is this basically what you do offline when you're networking? Doing the same thing online. So it's not just making a profile, it's actually being active, talking to people, connecting with people, and trying to understand them. So and that's where that was one thing that I missed out on personally. So
yeah,
I'm glad you mentioned it.
and same here. I missed out on it as well, up until I was working in that field, which forced me to create a personal brand. But
Right.
you don't want to be waiting that long to create it, right? And there's no reason for you to wait that long to create a personal brand wherever you are, right?
Right.
Whether it's professional, social, whatever you can think of. You have the liberty of having all these platforms available on your devices. Why
Right.
not take advantage of it and then start your journey there? So yeah, I'm glad we have the same opinion on this one.
Right, right, right. So this brings me to like this whole fight of like online and offline. Do you think technology will replace recruiter and like HR professions? Okay, given the fact that so many people are more online and have their information displayed in so many places, so do you think like technology will replace like recruiters and HR professionals?
Yeah, I think that's like a fear that everybody has, right? Like when are robots going to replace us, or when is technology going to replace us?
Yes.
But it is a more prominent. I wouldn't say it's a more prominent concern in my industry. I don't speak for everybody. I speak for myself. And
Right.
uh,
You're a recruiter, yeah. So what's
yeah,
your
yeah.
fear in that context?
And for me, I can see that there are areas of the things that I do that have strong automation potential, right? Because
Right.
when you spot an automation potential, I think that's when technology comes into play. So I'll give you an example of like I try to break down things that I was doing before, right? You
Yeah, yeah.
know, let's say like resume connecting, like resume collection, or candidate matching, um, just like logging in some very basic, or just like finding
Hmm.
people online, stuff like that. You
Right.
know, these I feel are areas that have a very strong automation potential. So for example, if you can spot more areas, if there's like other recruiters who can see things in their job scope that could be easily replaced by technologies,
Right.
I'm pretty sure that there will be, you know but then on the other hand, like we mentioned, right, there's going to be an evolvement of the way that recruiters do their work, and just like what is important to be a recruiter. And I
Right.
think there are going to be areas that are not going to be able to automate. Like,
Yeah.
negotiating is a big one, right? Like, when you speak to
True,
candidates,
true, true.
you're trying to close the offers, you're negotiating. You can't get a technology like bot or something, or we're not there yet, 5 years,
Right.
right? But, that area of being a recruiter is not going to be replaceable. Giving
Yeah.
a good candidate experience, right? Like if
Right.
somebody applies to a certain role, you want to be able to make sure that they have a very good experience interviewing with your company and stuff, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
So there's going to be you have to split it into two ways. You have to see that what kind of functions that you're doing right now could be replaceable by technology, versus what are the skills that are not going to be replaceable. So there's going to be a good balance there.
Yeah.
And then
Fair breakdown. Yes.
how you get ahead of the curve is just realizing that you need to upskill in
Yourself.
yeah, you need to upskill in yourself. You need to upskill in functions that you may not be so good at right now, but have a very low automation potential, right?
Yeah.
So
I think
This
it'd be
is just
very weird for me to take recommendation from a robot about something.
yeah, exactly. So, this is just something that, people think about for sure. Part of being more efficient in every company, in every role, I think, is to make sure that, you can automate a lot of things, make sure that things are being as fast as possible. And then it's not possible to obviously have like manpower, humans there, right? Because there's
Right.
technological solutions these days that make things a lot faster
Yeah, yeah,
than
yeah.
what like me and you could do.
Yeah, algorithms, bots, and all. So
Yeah,
many.
exactly.
Yeah.
But then, there's going to be areas of your jobs that is not going to be replaceable. So how do you keep up with the trend? How do you realize that what's the next emerging skill in your job that's not replaceable by technology? And then upskill yourself. I think it's a game of getting ahead of the curve these days. You
Yeah,
want
yeah,
to be
yeah.
able to, 5 years ago, maybe skills were different. And then, now data analysis is such a big skill, right? That recruiters need. But
Right,
5 years
right.
ago, that was probably something that recruiters never needed at all, or even in other business roles.
Yeah.
But like for
Yeah,
myself, I want to
yeah.
be able to upskill in that data analysis, take like courses and stuff to make sure that I'm also ahead of the curve.
Yeah,
So
it's
yeah,
basically what photo editing did to photographers. A lot of people
exactly.
had so much skill, but then once you can just click anything and edit it later, come on, a lot of
Yeah,
a lot of the skill required to actually click the right picture just gets thrown out of the window
yeah,
because you
exactly. And then,
cannot. Yeah,
you know, this is just like my industry right now, right? But then, even in like for yourself, like textile and all,
yeah,
5 to years, 20 years from today, you are going to see some things that get automation, like automated.
yeah. So
Some
many
things that,
manufacturing processes are going to be automated because supply
yeah,
chain.
yeah. So it's just a matter of like, how that individual reskill, upskill, gets ahead of the curve. I think it's much easier said than done. Um,
Yeah.
it's something that I
It's
think a
more
lot of
like a
people
hard
feel.
truth that
It is a hard
people
truth.
have
Yeah.
to, people just have to accept. If you are not, you can be good, but if your skills don't match what is required, then it, then yeah, then it just doesn't match.
Yeah. I mean, that's pretty much it. That's the truth, right? And then
Yeah, that's
I think
borderline. Yeah,
one exciting thing you see is that when there's automation potential, you means there's an idea. So you see a lot of startups coming up as well. So, that's
okay.
also the change that you're seeing in the recruiting industry. There's going to be a lot of startups that rely heavily on like AI and machine learning to provide you solutions that you didn't even know you needed before. So
Yeah,
yeah, so it's just the way things work, how do you just adapt with the time? I think
mm,
that's something that,
yeah. So it's a
yeah,
good, yeah, it's a good time for recruiters and for candidates because candidates can be easily found. They have more access to a lot of things. Like we said, the importance of social media like LinkedIn. So
yeah,
that also works. Like we did not have the opportunity to be so extensive on LinkedIn, and now people can do that. So it's something we didn't realize, but it's just yeah, it's just learning from like mistakes that we didn't realize it, and now it's actually a thing. So it's
yeah.
very important to be
Learning,
updated with how things work also. Yeah.
learning from mistakes and learning from trends, right?
Right.
Like when we were in university, like 7 years ago, we didn't know the importance of this, but if we did a little bit more research, we maybe would have been ahead of the curve. So
Exactly.
how
Yeah.
do you learn from mistakes and learn from trends, right? How do you catch up with that? So
Yeah.
that's something that people probably have to do more.
Yeah. It just springs down to being updated.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah.
On that note, I think that that'll be enough for today's conversation before it gets any longer. So thank you, Krisda, for joining us today and providing with such great insights. I'm really happy I got you on the show today.
Thanks, man. Thanks for having me.
Right. I hope to have you soon someday about more insights. So I hope this week's episode earned your subscribe and follow. You can reach out to us at textconnectpodcast at gmail.com, or you can also reach out to Krisda. His contact information will be in the description. So my name is Amanpreet Singh, and let's be educated shopaholics. I'll see you next week. Thank you.